Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today and for this session, how quantum computing will change everything forever, right? The industry forever. So my name is Sabrina Mansur. I am the director of the Massachusetts AI Hub. We're a quasi-state agency, and we're housed within the Mass Tech Collaborative, where we also have a sister hub that hosts the Quantum Initiative. So I'm excited to be here and to be with this fabulous panel, who I will now introduce. So to my right here, we have Aidan McCarty, CEO and co-founder of Verified, formerly Unum ID, and he is revolutionizing digital identity by enabling source user-owned identity networks. Aidan is a serial entrepreneur, a Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree, and a trained biochemist turned tech founder, with prior experience leading Stanford's social enterprise incubator and building civic tech platforms. Next, we have Jackie Shoback, co-founder and managing director of 1414 Ventures. Jackie is an early-stage venture firm, runs an early-stage venture firm focused on digital identity and fintech innovation, with over 25 years of leadership experience, including CEO, CMO, and COO roles at Staples, Fidelity Investments, TIAA, and Boston Private. Jackie brings deep expertise in scaling high-growth businesses and navigating regulatory and trust challenges in financial services. And next we have Ed Durkin, CFO of QuEra, where he oversees financial operations, strategic planning, and investor relations during a rapid phase of growth. Prior to joining QuEra, Ed held CFO roles at Casa Systems, Fuse, Actifio, and began his career with a decade at Ernst & Young. And finally, we have Nate Gemelke, co-founder and CTO, Chief Technology Strategist, sounds very fun, at QuEra. Dr. Nathan Gemelke is bringing his extensive expertise here today in neural atom quantum hardware and commercialization. He earned his PhD at Stanford and previously researched quantum information processing at Harvard and Penn State. So I'm actually going to start with you, Nate. Given your fantastic background, can you just set the table for us and help explain to us what quantum computing is in layman's terms?
Okay, the softball. Everybody knows what computing is. It's processing information, most often with bits, classical bits. And classical bits are basically switches. They're either on or off. In quantum computing, we do it a little bit differently. We make the fundamental unit of measure of information a quantum bit or a qubit. And a qubit is usually a microscopic body that obeys quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics has discrete states. But one of the features of quantum mechanics is also something called superposition, which is to say that when you put a microscopic object like that into a state, you can actually superpose the states that it's in. So that's called superposition. When you have multiple bits, you can also entangle them together. And entanglement is a really unique feature of quantum mechanics, which kind of entangles the fate or the states of qubits. And as you build a system of qubits larger and larger, the amount of information that you can store in that system scales very, very fast compared to what you can do with classical bits of information. So what we do at QuEra is we use what I like to say is God's qubit. God's qubit is a single atom. And that single atom, we use the electrons in it to represent information. And the way that we manipulate that information is shine laser beams on them and switch the electronic states inside the atoms using those laser beams. And so if you go into QuEra and you look at a quantum computer, it's a relatively big device. You will walk inside of it, kind of like the early computing systems made out of electronic transistors and things like that, ENIAC. It's a big beast. But when you walk inside of it, what you see are laser beams and vacuum chambers. And the workhorse of it really is inside that vacuum chamber, just single atoms that we're basically grabbing with laser light and manipulating to make this quantum computer. I don't know if that helps.
That helped me. I think atoms conveying information sounds great, right?
What do we got, 45 minutes?
Well, I do want to ask you, what is the state of the technology today? What breakthroughs still need to happen? And a question that I also get asked a lot, right? How does AI and quantum work together?
Okay, I'm going to take that one step at a time.
Yes, thanks.
Kind of like those of us making quantum computers have to take it one step at a time, and it's a long road. So to be very clear, the devices that we're making right now do not have more computing processing power than your typical classical computer in your laptop, for instance. But we are making systems that are bigger and bigger every day. We're running systems of commercial machines that are, between a few hundred qubits and up to 1,000 qubits or so. These are systems that are scaling very rapidly. I couldn't say that 6 years ago. Now, the road to useful quantum computing, the point at which a quantum computer is really out-computing what a classical computer could do, is probably pretty long yet. I mentioned that we're pushing the boundaries of 1,000 qubits now. We need to have really 1 million qubits or so, we think, to really be able to do things like break RSA encryption or design a small molecule or investigate what materials can do. But we are to the point where the machines are big enough that the only way to know what a quantum computer of that size will do is to make a quantum computer of that size and see what it does. If you try to compute classically, what would the input and the output relationship be on a quantum computer of that size using the world's biggest supercomputer? We're to the point where you can't simulate what that quantum computer can do. So that's interesting, and it means that there's real value to these quantum computers now. They certainly have scientific value to see what that input-output relationship looks like. They're useful for studying the early stages of computing usefully. We've just broken through a barrier with quantum computing that we've known was coming for a long time, called error correction, which is our ability to take the small errors and the manipulations and gates that we make in a quantum computer and actually start to correct them the same way that we do in classical computers, but with methods that honestly have to be completely redesigned for how quantum computers work. We're now doing this. And the world was not doing that more than a few years ago. Now we have the really tricky problem of trying to figure out how to use those error-corrected quantum computers to solve real-world challenges. How do we design algorithms that are error-corrected? And that road is long, and it's not just developing the hardware. I'm a nuts and bolts guy. I love lasers. That's how I got my start. But there's just as many of us at QuEra that are working on the algorithms design and the error correction techniques. And what they're doing is moving the goalposts closer to us. And so our whole job at QuEra is actually bringing those two things together. Honestly, which job is harder, I'm not sure. How long is the road, I'm not sure. But the last part of your question asked about AI. And just to give you a sense of how quickly things are moving in the world around us, not just inside quantum computing, when we started the company, we had no idea which would come first, a useful quantum computer or practical artificial intelligence. Now we know the answer. And that means that AI can do a lot of things. One thing that it can do is design a quantum computer. Another thing it can do is operate a quantum computer. Third thing that it can do is work together with a quantum computer. And that third area, I think, is probably the most exciting area. One of the applications that we talk about a lot is simulating how materials work. Supercomputing systems oftentimes are used to figure out what the electronic structure of materials is. Nowadays, we can use AI, classical AI, to kind of figure out what those calculations are likely to give once they finish. That's building surrogates using AI for classical computation on supercomputing systems. But what the supercomputing systems are doing is just generating quantum data. And a quantum computer is really good at that, generating the training data for training other systems that are learning how to design materials for us. So this is one of the things that we're really excited about at QuEra in the last couple of years, is exactly at that intersection. That's one of the key applications that we really have our eye on.
Amazing. Well, let me turn it over to you, Jackie, and ask from an investor's lens. This is really exciting to hear, right? We're having these breakthroughs, and what are some potential use cases in financial services from your perspective in quantum?
Yeah. Well, thanks for asking that question, and I think that was just a great framework that you laid out, Nate, about how there's the hardware, the software, AI, and how it's all coming together. So I think to think about the use cases, the best way to do it is to really first start with the types of problems that quantum can solve, right? Ultimately, what we think it will be able to solve. So I'm just going to quickly mention there are 4 problem types: simulation, optimization, machine learning, and cryptography. So simulation, a great example of a use case there, if you think about financial services, derivatives pricing is a great example of a use case, right? Like it just makes it so much easier and so much faster because of the compute power to be able to take this massive, highly complex system, which is derivatives pricing, and simulate that. Another example, maybe one we're even a little bit more familiar with. I used to work in mortgage-backed securities a long time ago. It was always so difficult to get a sense of the rate of the prepayments that you might experience with mortgages, especially if you had complicated structures. So that's another great example that quantum could take something that would take, I don't know, a whole bunch of analysts weeks and weeks and weeks, and could probably do it in like, I don't know, a minute, maybe faster. We can ask Nate that later. But so that's simulation. Optimization, it's interesting. Optimization, clearly one of the most obvious use cases in financial services would be portfolio optimization, right? But I'll give you another example. There's a company that I remember reading about, that I had heard about, called Quantum Signals, and they're actually doing large order execution. So think of really, really huge, large trades, which in today's world, you just break up into smaller trades. Well, using quantum, rather than just using guesswork, you can use this to really figure out the fastest, simplest, best, most profitable way to do it. And in their case, because quantum computers don't really exist the way that, sort of we're talking about in the future, that particular company is using something called signals, quantum signals, to incorporate into their classical algorithms. And really all that does is it gives an edge over how those algorithms would work if they weren't infused with those signals. So from your point with the use cases, your question on the use cases, we're kind of really at the very beginning of this journey. The near-term examples are baby steps. That's just the best way to put it, baby steps, because the hardware and the software need to kind of go up there need to be a few more breakthroughs. And then finally, machine learning, oh my goodness, deep analysis, predictability, predictions, there's incredible opportunity in that area. And I would be remiss, since I focus on digital identity, if I didn't mention AML and fraud detection and malware. Those are all great examples of use cases where quantum will hopefully be a huge game changer and really help to identify, those malicious, nefarious trends. And then, of course, Nate already mentioned cryptography, but cryptography is a big one. Next generation cryptographic algorithms that's in the future, but firms will need to be thinking about that. And in fact, a near-term example, there are companies out there, one in particular, Quantum Bridge, is doing quantum security, and they focus on what's called crypto agility. And what that means is crypto agility is really just in your security ecosystem, having the flexibility to move from one cryptographic model, if you will, to another. So there's obviously a lot of opportunity here with these use cases. Of course, the risk is all these things I talked about as benefits, there are other people who could be using this technology to actually make it, worse on the fraud and theft side. And of course, I would also just say right now, because it's so nascent, yeah, it's like very expensive and capital intensive to make these advancements, both on the hardware and on the software side.
Thank you. And that's a really nice way you've laid that out, that framework of all the different use cases. I appreciate that. Ed, I'm going to turn it over to you. And now that Jackie's kind of talked through some of the opportunities and risks and the amount of investment, right? I first want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about QuEra and what's new and exciting there. But I'd also love for you to address how leaders in financial services can balance this investment with cautious preparation.
Yeah, sure thing. So QuEra is actually a very exciting company. It's located, less than 10 miles from here, over in Alston.
Yeah, maybe switch. Yeah, use mine.
That better?
Yes.
Yeah. So QuEra, very exciting company, located near here in Alston. It's been around for about 6 years. Like many startups, it got Series A funding, about $50 million. It's actually a spin out of Harvard and MIT, both the tech and the team. It's a great founding team. In addition to Nate, we have somebody named Misha Lukin, who's a Harvard professor, won the 2024 American Physics Breakthrough of the Year Award. Like, he's the real deal, as well as Vladin Vulatek out of MIT. So companies focused on neutral atom modality of quantum computing. There are different modalities. IBM's doing one thing, Google another, but we're focused on neutral atom. And for the first 5 years, the focus was on perfecting the tech, if you will. And they did a great job on that. In the 2023-2024 timeframe, they did make some of these breakthrough technological advances, principally around something called quantum error correction. That enables the accuracy of the quantum computations at the highest level. Those breakthroughs impressed Google, and in February 2025, we announced a $230 million financing. Google was the single largest investor. It wasn't Google proper, the search engine company. It was the quantum AI business unit at Google. We had other high pedigree investors come in, like SoftBank Vision Fund, Valor Equity Partners. And a week ago, we just announced that NVIDIA invested in the company because there is synergies between what we're doing quantum and what NVIDIA is doing. So very exciting company, great validation. We think it's validating that the quantum era is coming. That's kind of the root of the QuEra name, quantum era. And just like mainframes gave way to PCs and cloud, like quantum is coming. It's just a question of when, not if. And for the fintech folks out in the audience, there are opportunities that Jackie touched on. There are risks, to attend to too, related to security and cryptography and things like that. But it's a good time to start learning about quantum computing, so you're prepared when there is quantum advantage, and quantum computers are doing things that classical computers will never do. As to the investment question, it's an interesting one. I think people. As to the mass market timing, some would contend it's 2 to 3 years away. Some would contend it's longer off. I do think right now it's important to get, if you haven't studied quantum, you need to study it, figure out what the opportunities are, from portfolio optimization and all the things that Jackie touched on, as well as to how does it impact your security infrastructure. And now's the time to do it. While there is time to prepare properly, and as you go through that journey, if QuEra, Nate, or I can ever help, we'd be happy to do so. So thank you.
Great. And I'll just mention that there is a nice piece out today from MassHire on QuEra, actually. So I took a look, and there's a lot of excitement around the Boston efforts on quantum, and the shout out that Q Day is coming. So we'll see if that sticks, Q Day. Aidan, I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you to talk to us about Verified and the focus that your company has on digital trust in this era.
Yeah, so we focus, I don't know if this is working, but
Here, take mine.
I can project too, but,
Here.
okay. Yeah, so we focus on streamlining secure onboarding for financial services. So the way that we relate to quantum computing really is in digital trust. Like, how do you know that it's actually the correct person coming to use your service online? That becomes increasingly difficult with a lot of new technologies, and quantum computing is certainly one of those. So for anyone that's built really any technology, and certainly financial technology, you probably have an understanding that cryptography is foundational to secure exchange of information of any kind online. That becomes increasingly important when you have quantum computing, which can break a lot of our current algorithms. So NIST recently came out with 3 new algorithms that are quantum secure. There's a 4th that's on the way. If you're using cryptography for financial services, you should definitely be looking at those and considering where you may want to use them. As far as it relates to us, I like to think of this in really 2 different ways. With anything security or risk related, not just quantum computing. One is, how do you prepare for when quantum computing comes and is a reality? How do you prepare yourself and secure against that? And the other is, once that's a reality, what are the likely outcomes that you need to be ready for? We are much more positioned for the outcomes that you need to be ready for. And what do I mean by that? Already today, there's loads of information that's been breached from different databases, personal data about individuals. Once quantum computing is ready for prime time and breaks the current algorithms that are being used to secure things with cryptography, like basic RSA, that's going to very likely expose loads more information, even if your firm is set up and ready for a quantum future. So what you need to be doing is looking not only at how do you secure your data better, but when there's way more that's been breached and available online, how do you prepare yourself for that eventuality? At Verified, how we look at that is by tying records back to phone numbers and telco data, which turns out to be an excellent proxy of identity and allows you to establish a bind between a physical phone number and a physical human being in the real world, so that you can't just come with stolen data to go create a financial account. You actually need a real phone number with access in real time to that phone number. But that's just one of many, many examples that you may consider.
That's great. So Jackie, I'm going to turn it back over to you and ask kind of what headline would you like to see 10 years from now, fast forwarding, around quantum and financial services?
Wow. Well, I can think of a couple of headlines. So I'm just going to give you a couple, not just one, because, I mean, quantum is just so massive, right? The opportunity, hundreds of billions, some people think trillions. I mean, it probably is trillions globally. But so I would say, let's see, 10 years out, I would say that if I saw a headline that said something like quantum plus AI has cracked the code on identity theft and fraud and malware by bending the curve on global cybercrime. So that would be one, because I feel like global cybercrime, everyone here in financial services, my God, fraud is through the roof, and it really is an epidemic. 17 trillion in global cybercrime this past year. So if quantum with AI could crack the code, that would be big. I think the second headline that I would aspire to and say, wow, we've arrived, is if there were a headline, something along the lines of efficiency, quantum driving efficiency and access, and let's see, quantum driving efficiency and financial inclusion and access to people globally. meaning, quantum has the potential to drive such incredible efficiency gains and to lower the barriers of access to financial services and financial products, but then also can completely revolutionize the types of products because there's an ability to personalize them to such a point where it's almost like you could have a product that truly is personalized and specialized for each individual because quantum has the ability to do that. So, explaining that headline, it's really about the ability of quantum to break down these barriers and enable financial inclusion and access for people. And that, as we know in our industry, is important because that enables, better livelihood for humans. I'm just saying that because we're talking so much about machines. It's important to remember there's humans in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really exciting to think about that personal experience, definitely, when we think about the future. And I'm going to go back to you, Aidan, now on the flip side too, right? Protecting people and their privacy, right? What would you like to see in terms of regulations and standards come out to kind of help put the guardrails in as we fast forward into this future?
Yeah, I think on this, NIST has done an amazing job with the standards that they've come out with. Nate, I'm sure, can speak better to that and knows much more of the details of that. But I think the other, kind of regulations that we look at a lot from a verified perspective are around KYC, the CIP rule, how do you know who it is online? I do want to mention that there's been a major change to how that's interpreted by FinCEN, FDIC, OCC, and NCUA as of June, allowing you to now rely on third-party data to autofill information on behalf of a user rather than having to collect it from the customer themselves. These kinds of things, I think, are really important to recognize where technology is going and not open the door for streamlining the user experience to such an extent that you have room to introduce new security measures. So a lot of the time, like in financial services onboarding today, there's a lot of safeguards and there's a lot of friction that's introduced because of legacy regulations. If you eliminate some of that, you can introduce friction elsewhere to secure other parts of the onboarding experience. So we'd really like to continue to see regulators adopt new technology and see the future in that way, right? Make it as easy as possible for users so that firms have more room elsewhere to secure it down the line.
That's a great answer. And then I think to wrap up, I'm going to have one final question, and I'm going to start with you, Nate, but anyone else wants to answer, feel free to jump in. We're sitting here in Massachusetts. We have this great headline coming out, quantum, the future is through Boston. What role do you think that we are playing here in shaping the global quantum finance future?
Massachusetts historically is the brains of the operation. We have fantastic universities at Harvard and MIT, UMass Boston, Northeastern, UMass Amherst. If I've forgotten any, please don't hang me. But that brain power is the engine for making this stuff work. We at QuEra benefit from that immensely. Of course, we're bringing in talent from all over the world, but it's really great to be able to work at home. We have really wonderful AI initiatives supported by the state. We have a really good support for deep tech. We have a really good understanding of how to launch things coming back from kind of the biotech revolution days. And we have chapters that we can play that we know work in Boston that we could apply to quantum as well. We have really great organizations like Mass Tech to help us get those things off the docks and launched into space. I think Massachusetts has a lot of unique talents. Obviously, we got to work with the rest of the world. We got to bring the rest of the world along. But Massachusetts is a leader. And we really have to remember that we owe it to the world to bring this technology into the world in a responsible way, but also to move fast and break things sometimes and let the other brilliant people in the fintech industry in Massachusetts also help us make sure that if we break something, that we can clean it up very quickly and make sure that that's delivered to the world in a responsible way. But I think Massachusetts is really kind of ground zero for all of this. And I think we've got fantastic talent to bring to bear on it.
Well, I 100% agree. Well, I want to thank you all for your time today, and for the audience. I know we're just moments away from wrapping up from a long, wonderful, exciting day. So thank you so much, and yeah, thanks to our panel.